Hey, welcome back to the Postindustrial Podcast. I'm your host, Carmen Gentile. We've got an extra special episode for you for the beginning of the new season. It's with longtime political strategist and founder of the Lincoln Project, RickWilson. Take a listen to our very interesting conversation. Rick, thank you so much for joining us on the Postindustrial Podcast. I really appreciate it.
Hey, I'm happy to be with you.
Hey, so I'm not sure if you're familiar, but I'll just let you know. You know, what we cover, our coverage area is the Rust Belt and Appalachia, what we like to call Postindustrial America.
Sure.
And in my humble estimation, it was Postindustrial America that handed Trump the presidency in 2016 because of Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, be it voter apathy for lack of turnout
Sure.
for Hillary, or however you want to define it. And at the same time, it played a major role in giving the presidency to Biden with the addition of Georgia, which is also in our coverage area. How, in your estimation, important is the Rust Belt and Appalachia to American politics?
Look, this is the center of what a lot of Americans view as the middle class of America, the working class of America. They view this area of the country, this long stretch, and I will say this, I have a lot of familiarity in Western North Carolina, where a lot of the things that manifested from the 1970s, 80s, 90s, and 2000s, as it became deindustrialized, as textiles and manufacturing and mining and all these other things transitioned out of the country or transitioned into a lower labor impact structure. Hang on a second, my dogs. Stop it. My dogs are misbehaving.
I'm definitely keeping that in, by the way.
Absolutely, please. Everyone knows about these damn dogs. They will go outside 800 times a day if I'm in the kitchen where I typically work. But if I am in any other room of the house, they'll sleep on the couch for 10 hours. Who knows? But anyway, so this part of the country has had a political salience in part because it is evocative in the emotional landscape of Americans of what the country used to look like. And it has always been a part of the country that gets hardest in economic downturns. In the Depression, it was hit very, 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 very hard. In the 80s slowdowns, it was hit very hard. In the 2008 slowdown, it was hit catastrophically. And so it's always been a part of the country that people have seen the damage that other economic forces and factors cause amplified in this stretch of land from, let's call it parts of upstate New York all the way down into essentially North Georgia.
Mm-hmm. In your estimation, if we were going to Monday morning quarterback all of that economic downturn, and as someone who's a longtime political operative, do you think that we could have done as a nation a better job to help people transition away from an industrialized society? But if you were going to armchair quarterback this thing, what could have been done better in a place like Northeast Ohio, which used to be a manufacturing powerhouse, and you had a rock rib Democrats working there, you had unions that supported them. Obviously, all that came crashing down over the last few decades. What could have been done better?
I am not a guy who often does the both sidesism thing. Mm-hmm. But both political parties were party to the destruction of the American economy for different reasons and different issues and different scale of outcomes. But both parties were perfectly eager to watch that part of middle America be traded away or shut down. And on the Democratic side, they lost a lot of the support of their working class base because they believed that the country was politically homogenous and that a working class Democrat in Youngstown, Ohio was just like a Democrat in San Francisco. And while that working class Democrat in Youngstown, Ohio, let's say he's working in a wire harness factory, building wire harnesses for the automotive industry, he may want the strength of a union behind him. He may want the government safety net around him. He may want things like Pell Grants and public education, all these things. And he is a Democrat in 100 different ways. Okay. But he's not culturally the same as someone from Manhattan or Boston or San Francisco or Los Angeles. And Republicans, and when I was a Republican, I was very good at this, were brilliant at exploiting the cultural differences between what the Democrats said they were for, which was they said they were for the working class, but what they spent a lot of their time on, in the eyes of folks in Appalachia particularly, were boutique issues that were not relevant to them. Now, the other place where the Democrats had a giant failure mode on this, and I think it's important to be honest about it and be clear about it, is they promised from the late 80s, early 90s on, oh, we're going to retrain you for new green jobs. We're going to retrain you to code. We're going to retrain you to be a holistic solar panel installer, or whatever the hell it was. And you know what? We used to focus group these questions. And you know what those people in the Midwest and in Appalachia and the industrial heartland of America believed? They thought it was a lie. Why did they think it was a lie? Because it was BS all along. It was always a lie. It never worked at scale. Yes, one or two pilot programs here or there, but for the most part, a guy who had worked in the same factory his dad had worked, or his dad and his grandfather had worked, and when they had a union job that provided them good benefits, good retirement, lifetime health care, when those things went away, it didn't matter that the guy was going to get a job, putting solar panels on a roof somewhere of a high school, because that was not the same job. It was not a cultural and grounded thing that they could understand that was their life. And the scale of those training programs, they are riddled with failure. They are riddled with consultants. They are riddled with BS. They're riddled with bad metrics, and nobody believes them. Nobody believes them. We did a project one time for a Republican-leaning clean energy thing. And we went and we did some studies in West Virginia and Pennsylvania. And we said, okay, we're going to, promote building new nuclear, solar, and wind. And these guys in the coal industry were like, you're lying. You're lying. They're lying to us. They're always lying to us. You've lied to us 100 times. We were told we were going to get this, this, and this after our jobs got shipped out. We were told we get this, this, and this after this stimulus bill passed. They just don't believe it. Now, on the Republican side, they eagerly adopted the McKinsey BS of monetize everything, tear everything apart, break it up and sell it, ship it out. And as a former Republican, it took me a long time to realize that wasn't a free market equation. That was just a rip and read thing. That was an exploitative decision to break apart companies and break apart and consolidate and sell off companies that were not economically efficient in their idea. They're not looking for free markets. They weren't looking for capitalism or private enterprise. They were looking for the fastest path to burn down these companies and cash them out. So both parties have screwed over these working class voters. And look, the Democrats' cultural disconnect with those people is why you got Trump. It's why you got Trump. Because I will tell you, if I'm a working class white male Democrat, you know what I never, ever, ever want to hear a goddamn word about? Guns or climate change. I want to hear, or LGBT issues. I want to hear about how you're going to get me my job back that I got blown out of in 2008. I want to know how you're going to give my kid a job who's had to instead to serve, 6 tours in Iraq and 2 in Afghanistan because he can't get a well-paying job at home. I want to hear about no bullshit, real approaches to things that are going to restore the dignity and the security and the stability of their lives. And if you can't give them that, and if you only promise them blue sky stuff, you're always going to have them feel a certain distrust and hostility. And so when someone comes along and says, I'm culturally like you, I don't like those educated elite liars any more than you do, even if they're not 100% political match, culture beats politics all the time. Heart beats brain all the time. And look, we need a country that's post-coal. We need a country that is largely, post-carbon energy drivers. We're still going to always need some carbon-based things for industrial processes, etc. But how you get people to move from this despair and this despondency and this adoption of a sort of terrifying authoritarianism on the far right to that world requires meaningful action, requires demonstrable steps, requires things that are more than press releases or websites or promises of retraining, and actual things, actual real structural change. And it's really difficult to sell that unless you do it.
I agree with you that there were a number of falsehoods regarding retraining and green new energy. Obama's clean coal campaign slogan in 2008 always comes to mind. I love the way your reaction. I knew that would get that reaction out of you.
I've been anti-coal for about 30 years, but anyway, going on.
Okay. But, and I understand, and I agree with you that there were a number of promises that were not kept along those lines. But then Trump comes along in 2015 and 2016, and he starts promising people in Ohio, starts promising people in Western PA and other places that he's going to reopen the steel factories and he's going to reopen the mines. And I know this is something that these people know damn well is not really possible because those places have been shuttered for 40 years and many of them have been already torn down. And even if they weren't, you just can't flip a switch on a dormant plant that's been decades sitting idle and expect to produce steel. But they bought that idea. So why is it they were able to swallow that lie, but were able to see through that Democrat lie leading up to it? That's more of a sociological question as well,
look,
rather than political.
In part, it's a simple answer. It's desperation. And if you offer desperate people a coherent explanation of what the world looks like, even if it's not real, they'll grasp it very frequently. So if you tell these people in Appalachia, hey, the reason you lost your job isn't because the coal industry is dying or X or Y investment bank sold off the textile mill in your neighborhood, but they tell you instead, oh, Mexicans took your jobs, the caravan is coming, Antifa's coming, they're trying to condition your kids to be gay. If you give them these explanations convincingly and coherently, even if they're lies sell when done that way. And look, the problem, again, as I go back to this a lot, is Democrats frequently run on the belief that policy wins elections. And it doesn't. Policy does not win elections. Policy wins debates in drawing rooms. What wins elections is a firm, vigorous, emotional connection to the people you're trying to persuade. And if you can't persuade people with an emotional connection to them, you're almost always going to lose. People will vote for the candidate who they like, who they feel is similar to them socially, who they feel will be an implementer of their desires and their imagined policy outcomes. They will not vote for a candidate who lectures them. They will not vote for a candidate who demeans them. And that, I'm not saying that happened a lot with Democrats, but what is the message that a lot of these people heard? Oh, you dirty hick rubes out in the country digging coal. We'll deign to give you a job putting up windmills. It's not when you get a guy like Trump who scans to those people as one of them I know it's completely paradoxical, but who scans as one of them, who scans as someone who has contempt for institutions, for large enterprises, for the elites, for the educated. That's an appealing, if kind of dirty prospect to a lot of people.
Along those lines, what are your concerns leading up to this election in a, let's call it a post-January 6th Capitol coup attempt world? Are you concerned that we could see more of the same and worse? I know that as somebody, as a longtime journalist who covered conflict in Afghanistan and Iraq, I see rhyming events that I've seen play out elsewhere happening here in America now, and it gives me great concern. I'm worried. How about you?
I'm not concerned about it. I'm absolutely certain it's coming. And I hate saying that. I'm absolutely certain it's coming.
I feel the same
We
way.
are going to see more violence because the political incentive structure on the right is that violence works, that violence scares people, that violence makes people react, that violence catalyzes the base of the Republican Party now, and that they have processed it in a way where it's okay in their minds because this violence is directed at the enemy, the communists, the socialists, the pedophiles, the LGBT people, all these things that they're justifying, the deep state, all these things they're justifying the violence with are a centerpiece now of their entire party message. Look, the old Republican Party from the before times, back in when I had flowing locks of golden hair, believed in things like individual liberty, personal responsibility, the rule of law, the Constitution. The party of the Republican Party of today believes in Donald Trump as the dear leader, also in the service to Donald Trump as the dear leader, as the main and only test of electoral competence and quality. And the wholesale importation of violence as a legitimate political practice was catalyzed on January 6th. And one of the lessons they've learned is how close they got. And if you have a coup attempt that doesn't get punished at the top, all that coup attempt was a training exercise. And we will see it again. They will try it again. I can tell you, if you have close elections in some of these states, you're going to have people who, if they don't get their way, they're going to show up at the supervisor's office with guns. You know, you saw it last week where you had an armed guy storm an IRS office in Ohio because of the FBI search warrants on Mar-a-Lago. You saw armed folks surrounding an IRS office in Arizona. And these are things, unfortunately, where the friction is so low now between the intentionality of the performative part of it and the execution of violence that I am convinced we're going to end up in a situation in the coming months that's very stressful, it's very tense for the country, and authoritarian movements wire violence deeply into everything they do. So I'm like I said, I'm not concerned about it. I'm certain it's coming. It's an ontological certitude that this is the core of their philosophical understanding now of power. You have guys like Steve Bannon running the show in the Republican Party. They're going to pursue violent strategies because they know, historically speaking, that if you want to destroy a democracy, you first have to break it, and violence breaks democracies.
You know, I think there's a wide-held belief in the Democratic Party and among Democratic leaders and some Republican leaders, let's say Romney Republicans,
Sure.
who think that the Justice Department and prosecution and convictions are going to help lower the temperature by getting some of these people off the streets and behind bars, and that's going to dissuade others from doing the same. We're taking up arms. I think we're past that. I think there's enough people out there who, as you said, believe in dear leader so greatly that they will risk imprisonment and death to carry out his orders.
That is, I believe that is the case. And look how they portrayed the people that have been arrested for crimes committed on January 6th, 2021. Martyrs, political prisoners, victims. These people knew what they were doing. The people who ordered them to do it, e.g. Donald Trump, knew what they were doing. They sent these people down there, but those folks all had agency. They all had a vote in the matter. They all had a choice to make. And the ones who committed violent acts that day, and the ones who vandalized the Capitol and attacked police and caused the deaths of 5 police officers, or five individuals that day, they weren't there as philosophical zombies. They were there as activists. They wanted to overthrow a free and fair, small d democratic election. They wanted to interrupt the electoral vote count so that they could stretch this thing out a few more weeks, cause a little more chaos, overthrow a little more of the government. Those folks almost got their way. It is a matter of seconds where Officer Goodman led the mob away from a group of senators. It was a matter of seconds where the security detail around the speaker stopped the mob from coming through that window by shooting Ashley Babbitt. Those people were there on a mission to destroy America. Let's not BS around it. Let's not pretend it wasn't something that it was. It was the desire to stop the free and fair election of 2020. It was a desire to stop the peaceful transfer of power. And look, violence is a solution if you have exhausted all the legal avenues and you're someone who believes that violence is a political tool. America has long believed that violence was the last refuge. I mean, the last time we had a situation like this was, the Civil War. And we look a lot like 1859 right now. And as the great science fiction writer William Gibson says, the future is here. It's just not distributed evenly. Well, we're in a civil war. It's just not distributed evenly yet. We don't have a lot of tools right now to stop it. There's an audience every day on the right that's fed by Fox and by Facebook. And by the way, if you want to know where Fox's strongest viewership is, and you want to know why Democrats are losing voters in Appalachia, there you go. They have a solid rock on the media markets in those areas. They're the number one by a long stretch cable outlet. And Fox is fighting a culture war with those people. For those people, they're telling them the Democrats are a party of pedophiles, communists, traitors. They want to put the deep state, George Soros, in charge. And every day those people hear that message. And every day they're told it's either Trump or communism, Trump or pedophilia, Trump or Antifa, Trump or illegal immigrants killing you and raping you. Every day they're told that. And there is nothing comparable to that on the left or the center in this country. There's no media outlet that has the scale, scope, and intentionality of Fox News. They are not a journalism operation. They are not a news organization. They are an agitprop channel that's really good at what it does. Listen, if MSNBC had the marketing and skill of Fox, it'd be a fair fight, but they don't. Fox knows what they're doing to their audience. They do it anyway. And between Fox and Facebook, you see a lot of people, especially over the age of 60, in these parts of the country, who are now willing to believe anything and everything. They're now willing to believe the darkest fantasies in the world about what our country is. They're now willing to accept the presence in their party coalition of racism and outright, not just anti-trans, but anti-LGBT language that 10 years ago would have been unthinkable, even in the Republican Party. And they're willing to accept violence. They believe they're in an existential battle against evil. And so Fox and Facebook feed that every day, and there's nothing to push back on it in the center and the center left, the center right, and the left. Just nothing. There's no equivalency to it. So, all these seeds that were planted years ago by social and economic and other conditions have played out over 2 generations in American politics now, where the initial Reagan coalition was in part that older optimistic Republican thing of free markets and strong defense and all those things, but it had an underpinning and an undertone of, we didn't like what happened in the 60s. We didn't like the social revolutions of the 60s, and we're going to put a barrier up against that happening again. And as that evolved, it got uglier and uglier and uglier. And, you saw this peak in 2010 of the Tea Party movement. And that was when establishment Republicans like myself realized that the monster was out of the box. And we did our best for about 6 years to control it and to try to break it and try to get it under some sort of restraint. But once Trump activated it, it became the entire party. It became the entire movement. And people are drawn to big sweeping movements. They're drawn to the excitement and the rallies and the yelling and the noise and the smoke, and they want to see it. It's a spectacle.
Well, you mentioned Fox and its outsized influence on politics. Fox recently has been playing a little bit of footsie with your home state governor, Ron DeSantis, as potentially being somebody who would assume the Trump mantle and could execute the Trump playbook without all the Trump baggage. What do you think about Ron DeSantis as potentially assuming that role?
Well, here's the bet that Rupert and Lachlan are making. It's the same bet they made in 2016, which was Trump will be great for ratings. They never thought Trump would win. They never believed Trump would win the primary. They thought it would be Jeb or Cruz or someone else. And that bad bet on their part then, by not covering anything about Trump that was negative to Trump, became one of the most empowering things that happened to Donald Trump's 2016 campaign. It's one of the things that guaranteed him the win. And they're betting now on DeSantis. They're thinking, oh, well, we can clean him up, run him through the car wash. We can pretend that he's not the same kind of character that Trump was in 16, and we can posture him as a normal Republican. Two things obtained here. First off, DeSantis is not a normal Republican. He's a Trump Republican. He will stick with Donald Trump till the end. There will never be another moment where the party looks like it did 10 years ago. It will never happen again. And DeSantis knows that. He's a creature of the Trump party. He speaks ultra MAGA fluently. He is also a man already showing us he's adopted the authoritarian strain of Trumpism by governing in a very roughshod way in the state of Florida, by engaging in a lot of actions in Florida that have been exceedingly unpopular as an executive, and that play to all the very dangerous tropes of what's happening inside the party. Oh, I've got to pass a bill where you can't say gay in the classroom because any teacher who does is obviously a groomer pedophile. We're going to punish companies that have a policy on abortion or LGBT rights because they don't fit with the governor's view. All these things are post-Republicanism and Trumpish authoritarianism. Now, on the other side of this, if Donald Trump is not eaten by wolves, hit by a bus, or put in jail, he's going to run for president in 2024. All these other candidates are going to get blown out of the water. They're not going to beat him. He's going to be the nominee. And I'll tell you why I speak so confidently of this. Donald Trump controls 35 to 40% of the Republican base vote. He controls them in a way no American political figure has ever controlled his base. Every Republican elected official is terrified of that mob. They're terrified of that base. They don't want to cross it politically, or personally. They will bow. They will bend the knee. They will say to Ron, you're a young man. You can run later. Let Donald have another term. He will lose the primary to Trump. They will all lose a primary to Trump. And at the end of the day, this is a lot of older Republicans are looking at DeSantis and going, I don't love him, but he's not Trump. They want to be put back in the matrix. Okay. They want to return to the old fantasy world, the old dream, and say, oh, well, he's a conservative, but he's not crazy like Trump. It's a dream. It's an illusion. The party base has left them behind. All these billionaires giving Ron DeSantis money, they would never be in the same room with a red hat rally going MAGA voter for 30 seconds. And yet they're pretending that Ron DeSantis is the solution to that. Just as they pretended this year that Mitch McConnell was the solution to MAGA Senate candidates. Well, every single one of Mitch McConnell's candidates has gotten blown out. And instead of his candidates, we have Blake Masters and Herschel Walker and Dr. Oz and J.D. Vance and the whole freak show of these people who have given the Democrats a lifeline on holding control of the Senate because he couldn't deliver what he promised to the elites. The base has changed. Trump controls it. Trump manages it every day. There is no escaping that. And unfortunately for them, Trump controls it in large part through the undying loyalty of white working class voters over the age of 50 and of voters with a high school education or less, with a lock solid control. It is not escapable. It is not deniable. It is something we should all learn to live with every day. When you go to the doctor and says, hey, you got a lump, it's cancer, we got to take it out. You can't just say, oh, the lump doesn't exist. The lump isn't there. It will kill you. They denied it for a long time. Mitch McConnell's people right now are losing their minds because the world has been eaten by the people they despise on the right. And there's no solution to it. As long as Trump is still, in the political space, there's no solution to this problem.
Well, the upcoming election, the one we're having in November, a number of Trump's candidates that he's endorsed in the Senate are trailing by double digits currently. I don't believe these current polls because we saw the exact same thing happen in the last midterm elections in which
these races are all going to look. They're better for Democrats than they looked 6 months ago.
Right.
But if anybody in the Democratic Party takes their foot off the gas right now, they're committing political malpractice. Because these races will be closer in the end. They will
Agreed.
close as races do. There's a tremendous advantage for them in that the Republicans are the most abnormal, strange, mutant parade, as I call it, we've seen in a long time. It's like, remember, we used to have elections where there'd be one candidate who was a witch or one candidate who was a kook.
Yeah.
And now it's the whole slate. It's all of them. And so we've got a political space where the Democrats can excel in the Senate races, in part because the Trumpist candidates can still lose, and it's still good for Trump.
Yeah.
The Trumpist candidates can still lose, and he can say, it's McConnell's fault. Oh, you didn't go hard enough for me. You didn't love me enough. Which I think as time goes on, that helps for the 2024 cycle a lot more. The more it becomes about Donald Trump and a return to the chaos, cruelty, conspiracy, and confusion of those times, COVID, of those times, the better off for Democrats in 24.
The one that really concerns me about this upcoming election is PA gubernatorial candidate Doug Mastriano.
As he should.
He really worries me because he definitely exudes that General Michael Flynn crazy eye energy that could be utilized to galvanize a large mob of armed supporters on election day to intimidate people at the polls.
Sure.
And if he loses, which I think he will, he is not going to go quietly into that good night. I have a feeling that he's going to be, leading his troops onto the battlefield, be it at Gettysburg or wherever.
A lot of the Republican candidates for elected office this year are already saying, they're pre-gaming it. If I lose, it was rigged. If I lose, I was cheated. If I lose, it was the deep state. They're following Trump's lead. They're following Trump's lead. They're following Trump's playbook. And if they continue to follow that playbook, continue to follow that lead, again, that's why I am concerned. We will have violence. That's why I believe we will have violence, because they recognize something very coldly and very clearly. If you're a 75-year-old woman who works as a poll watcher, and by the way, folks, poll watchers tend to be little old ladies.
Yeah.
Just statistically speaking.
Sure.
No, and yes, it varies widely, but they tend to be retired or older women.
My grandmother was one. Yeah. So
of course.
Yeah.
Of course. And a guy comes in up in full battle rattle, wearing body armor and a helmet and carrying an AR-15. Granny's not going to sit there in the chair. She's going to get the hell out. She's going to run.
Right.
And those people are now increasingly present at Mastriano type events. They are an increasingly obvious part of the coalition on the far right with Mastriano and Trump and everybody else, the Oath Keepers, the Proud Boys, the Boogaloos, all these cosplayers. And so there's a degree to which we better be ready for that. And I'm hoping that law enforcement in these states will be ready for that, because they're going to have to arrest people that are threatening intimidation. I remember in 2008, there was this accusation that the Black Panthers had suppressed hundreds of thousands of Republican votes.
Oh, I remember that.
Because two guys showed up at a polling place wearing berets, and I think one had like a walking stick or something.
Right.
And this became a cause celeb on the far right for months, maybe even years. But these are people who like, well, of course I'm going to carry my AR-15 into the polling place with me. Oh, okay. Different world.
When you mention the elderly, of course, I have to ask, should Joe Biden run in 2024?
Joe Biden should run in 2024. Democrats need to stop this shit. They need to stop it right now. Because all the talk about it this year on the far left and the progressive side, he should leave now. He should announce he's retiring. Get the hell out of here. Joe Biden's poll numbers have gone up in the last 6 weeks, weirdly pulling a lot of weaker Democratic candidates up behind him. The better his numbers are, the better they'll do in November. This is 101 politics, okay? This is the baseline, day one in Republican politics is whoever's at the top of the ticket needs to be popular. You need to help them be popular. I do think Biden has look, he's running. If he runs, and I think he will, I think he should, he will be an old guy. He's an old guy.
Yeah.
Okay. He just is. But so is Trump. And Trump is an unhealthy old guy and a psychotic old guy. And I think America will default back to somebody who makes them feel slightly less terrified of nuclear war and slightly less terrified of the capricious and bizarre, conspiracy-driven beliefs of a guy like Trump. I think Biden has an advantage in that regard. And look, he's got more name ID than any other Democratic candidate, even in the wannabe field, by far. He's been a picture on the national landscape for 35, 40 years now. People know Joe Biden. His image, for better and worse, is baked in the cake. They know who they're getting. They know what they're getting. And frankly, Biden now has, by a miracle, 3 things to run on that he didn't have even 6 weeks ago. A decline in inflation, a decline in gas prices and overall consumer prices, and a bunch of accomplishments in the Senate, and it passed through the Senate, even though he faced opposition from his own party. He's passed a bunch of meaningful things. And again, you want to go talk to these folks in Appalachia, talk about the infrastructure parts of it, directly connect those jobs to their lives, and then follow through on it. And I think there's a possibility there that he could do a lot of good for himself and a lot of good for the country by campaigning basically on what he's accomplished, even in the last 6 weeks.
Before I let you go, Rick, I'm going to ask you to look into your crystal ball for a moment and tell me, do the Democrats, do you think, are they going to hold the Senate?
I think they are going to hold the Senate. It's going to be close, but I think they're going to hold the Senate. House is still not in great shape. And that's just a matter of redistricting nationally. That's just that's just one of those like honest answers about what the world looks like.
Do you think, though, there's still time for Democrats to make up? Traditionally, this being an off year after an election, in which the other party always makes a big comeback. In 2010, I remember the Tea Party influx after Obama's election in 2008, and he characterized it for what it was. It was an ass whooping, and it looked like just a few months ago that the Democrats were definitely going to get their asses whooped in the House and that was going to be close in the Senate. Now I feel like there's a possibility they may pick up a seat or two in the Senate, and it's going to be pretty close in the House.
I think, look, there are a couple opportunities in the Senate that are opening up that weren't there before. Marco Rubio is in some actual trouble now.
Yeah.
Val Demings was my sleeper race the whole year. That was the one race I think I even posted about it back in January. There's one race that that could be a weird breaking chemistry, it's Florida. And partly because the MAGAs don't love Marco Rubio. They remember him as an anti-Trump person.
Right.
Ron DeSantis hates Marco Rubio. Rick Scott hates Marco Rubio. Florida is expensive, and he hasn't been raising money at the clip he should. Val Demings outraised him. Val Demings last quarter outraised what Marco's raised the whole year. She has been a good candidate, solid, workmanlike, nuts and bolts, no bullshit. It's my sleeper race. It's still a tough race. It's a red state. Don't fool yourself. But she's really performing at a level that has put it into contention, put it into play. So I do think you could have a net 1, net 2 in the Senate if all goes well, knock wood. And again, 6 months ago, if you'd asked me honestly what I thought the House would look like, I would have said 70 seats.
Wow.
And now I think it's going to be in the 20s. That's a lot. That's a butt whooping. That's bad. It's not good. But it's not the apocalypse. It's not the end of days. And in the Republican Party, there's going to be a beautiful bloodbath between Stefanik, Jordan, and McCarthy for who's going to kill the other one for Speaker.
That's true. Yeah.
And I am here for it, my friend.
Well, we'll have to talk to you after the election results to see if your predictions come true.
Happy to. Anytime.
Okay. Great. Thanks for being on.
Thanks so much for having me.
Appreciate it. I want to thank RickWilson for joining us on the Post-Industrial Podcast. I want to thank you for listening. So until the next time, keep checking back at postindustrial.com for news stories and podcasts, and we'll see you again real soon.
This podcast was produced in partnership with Postindustrial Media. Postindustrial covers people, culture, and ideas for post-industrial communities around the world. Visit postindustrial.com to learn how you can join the post-industrial community.